Let's explore how to navigate that crucial middle ground, the subtle space that keeps you from sinking into complete emotional collapse when dealing with a toxic or narcissistic dynamic. One of the absolute hardest parts of managing these relationships is when walking away entirely isn't an option. Maybe you're co-parenting young children, dealing with an inescapable family obligation, or tied to a workplace situation you can't immediately leave. In those moments, you're forced to stay in the ring. You have to monitor every reaction and constantly dial down your own emotions. Why do we do this? Because it's a shield. It keeps us clear of the gaslighting, shields us from narcissistic rage, protects us from their cruel fighting tactics, and stops us from spinning in the exact same arguments day after day. In those scenarios, emotional suppression becomes a deliberate, strategic play. However, even when it's intentional, forcing yourself to detach from your natural feelings and continuously push your reality downward, even with radical acceptance, takes a massive psychological toll. Before you truly grasp what you're dealing with, this emotional shutoff isn't strategic at all. You stop responding not because you're managing the situation, but because you are thoroughly numb, overwhelmed, and helpless. While some people respond to this boundary crossing by dysregulating and fighting back, the vast majority simply freeze. They go quiet. What we end up seeing is a subdued, mildly dissociated individual trapped inside a toxic dynamic, constantly battling underlying shame and self-blame. This state is often the precursor to a full system breakdown or collapse, something that happens when you don't fully comprehend what you're up against. Here lies the real difficulty. The tactical management strategies used when you can't leave look almost identical to the passive numbing that happens when you don't understand the dynamic. It gets dangerously blurred. So, how do you strategically disengage without slipping right back into self-protective numbing and eventual collapse? When we find ourselves in abusive or deeply invalidating environments, especially those without immediate, overt physical danger, our initial instinct is almost always to fight back. We challenge their revision of reality. We push back against the insults and character attacks. But over time, trauma bonding takes root, and the gaslighting deepens. Our innate human desire to remain attached and connected acts as a powerful, almost magnetic pull. Consequently, we start opening the door to self-doubt. We wonder if maybe there's some truth to what they're saying. We start believing that by fighting back, we are actually the ones creating the conflict. That we are complicit in the chaos. The healthy, self-preserving instinct to fight for our autonomy slowly vanishes when we remain in the pressure cooker too long. Any conflict that erupts later on becomes less about asserting our individuality and more of a panic trauma response. Without a clear understanding of narcissism or trauma bonding, people gradually slide into numbness, ultimately reaching a point of total psychological collapse. It's a heavy, crushing apathy, a profound sense of why even bother, that deadens the spirit. In this collapsed state, individuals stop taking care of themselves, struggle to care for others, and lose all connection to meaningful purpose. It is, for all intents and purposes, total defeat. The entire core of my work, and the work of therapists who specialize in narcissistic trauma, is to intervene before a person reaches that point of collapse. Once someone drops into that deep apathy, pulling them back out is an uphill battle. The double-edged challenge is ensuring that as you learn to cope and disengage, you don't lose yourself so completely in the process that you drift right back into that dangerous numbing. That is the delicate middle path we have to walk. So, how do we actually pull this off? 1. Understand the mechanics and ditch the self-blame. First and foremost, you have to thoroughly understand how toxic, antagonistic, and narcissistic relationships operate. More importantly, get curious about your own reactions. Stop writing yourself off as just codependent or someone who attracts bad people. Your ongoing involvement, and the intense, uncomfortable reactions brought out in you, are fundamentally about survival and self-protection. They showcase how fragmented you've had to become just to stay safe and attached in an unsafe environment. People sometimes call this their crazy love, but it isn't an irrational obsession. It is a logical attachment behavior in response to an unpredictable person. You aren't crazy, you are actively being impacted by harm. There's a massive difference. As this realization takes root, you begin to see that you aren't complicit in your own mistreatment. You're dealing with someone who might claim to love you, but who will consistently fail to protect you. A more grounded, coherent awareness begins to form. 2. Reconnect through safe human connection. None of this recovery work can happen in isolation. You need supportive, empathetic, validating, and consistent people around you. Finding this isn't easy, especially if you've been isolated by a toxic partner or a dysfunctional family system. You may have lost old friendships, felt blocked from making new ones, or felt too ashamed to reach out to the people you used to know. But remember, the only way to heal relational trauma is through healthy relationships. Safe attachment cannot be achieved purely inside your own head, it must be experienced with safe people. 3. Strategic preparation and intentional recovery. When you do have to interact with the narcissistic individual, treat it like an event you actively prepare for, much like studying for an exam or packing for a long trip. Before the interaction, take a few deep breaths. Remind yourself not to go deep. Do not defend, engage, explain, or personalize. Remind yourself that their behavior is a reflection of them, not you. Anchor to your why, tap into the overarching reason you are maintaining this contact. Maybe it's keeping a bridge open to other family members you love. Maybe it's preserving a sense of stability for your children. Maybe it's keeping a job you need while you look for an exit. Focus on that bigger picture, it matters more than the person draining your energy. Plan the aftercare. Acknowledge that these encounters will exhaust you. Plan for the back end. Go to bed early, engage in some physical movement, build something pleasant into your evening, or call a grounded friend. The takeaway. Doing these things intentionally acts as a constant reminder that these situations are genuinely hard. It fortifies your system and maintains your clarity so you don't collapse, normalize the toxicity, or slip back into self-blame. It helps you remember that not every person or relationship operates this way. It's a constant balancing act to stay engaged when necessary without being swept away by the current of numbness. Clear awareness, radical acceptance, an accurate narrative, a strong support network, and deliberate self-care are your anchors against that riptide. Yes, you will likely feel drained or terrible after interacting with them. But simply knowing why it's so heavy, and realizing that there is nothing inherently broken within you, is how you forge that middle path toward healing. I truly hope you can find that path for yourself. Now, moving past those initial foundations, let's talk about what walking this middle path actually looks like in your day-to-day reality, the concrete, actionable tools that stop your nervous system from slipping back into that dangerous numbness. 4. Mastering strategic communication, the BIF method. When you cannot avoid interacting with a toxic or narcissistic person, standard communication rules simply do not apply. If you express vulnerability, it will be weaponized. If you try to explain your perspective, it will be parsed for ammunition. This is where tactical communication becomes your shield. A powerful framework to adopt here is what experts call the BIF approach, keeping your interactions brief, informative, friendly, and firm. Brief, keep your words to an absolute minimum. The less you say, the less there is to distort or attack. Informative, stick strictly to objective facts, logistics, and necessary updates. Especially in co-parenting or workplace settings. Leave out your opinions, feelings, or moral arguments. Friendly, maintain a calm, polite, and neutral tone. Not overly warm or enthusiastic, but civil. This deprives them of the emotional drama they are actively seeking to provoke. Firm, end the interaction once the necessary information has been conveyed. Do not leave doors open for unnecessary back-and-forth debate. When you shift to this style, you aren't being cold or passive-aggressive. You are establishing a professional boundary within a personal space. You are treating the interaction like a business transaction rather than an emotional exchange. Somatic anchoring, keeping your body out of freeze. One of the reasons disengagement often slides into numbness and collapse is because your physical nervous system senses danger and triggers a freeze response. Your mind might understand what's happening, but your body is stuck in a state of high alarm. To stay in that strategic middle path without shutting down completely, you need physical, somatic anchors during these interactions. Feel your feet on the ground, literally press your feet firmly into the floor during a conversation. This simple physical sensation signals to your brain that you are grounded, present, and safe in your physical body. Regulate your breathing. When anxiety kicks in, our breathing becomes shallow, which tells the brain we are in immediate danger. Lengthen your exhales. A slow, extended breath out activates your parasympathetic nervous system, keeping your rational mind online. Use sensory objects. Keep something small in your pocket, a smooth stone, a ring, or a textured coin. Touching it discreetly during a tense interaction pulls your focus back to the present moment, keeping you from dissociating. 6. Implementing microboundaries. When you can't set macro boundaries, like cutting contact completely, you must become a master of microboundaries. These are small, precise limits designed to protect your time, energy, and mental bandwidth. For example, set time limits before entering a conversation. Rather than an open-ended phone call, state up front, I only have 5 minutes before my next commitment, but I wanted to confirm tomorrow's schedule. Transition from real-time communication to written communication whenever possible. Emails or text messages give you the time and space to process information calmly and craft a rational response, stripping away the immediate pressure of face-to-face manipulation. Designate specific windows of your day to check and respond to their messages, rather than letting notifications interrupt your peace constantly. 7. Protecting your core identity outside the dynamic. The ultimate danger of staying connected to a narcissistic dynamic is that over time, their reality begins to crowd out yours. If you are constantly managing their moods and suppressing your own reactions, you risk losing touch with who you are outside of this relationship. To avoid collapse, you must consciously cultivate a separate, driving internal world that they have zero access to. Protect your hobbies, your creative outlets, and your personal interests with fierce loyalty. Invest energy in spaces where your reality is validated, where your effort is appreciated, and where your voice is actually heard, whether that's a hobby group, a support community, or a trusted friendship. Remind yourself daily, their perception of you is a reflection of their limitation, not your worth. You do not need their validation to exist, and you do not need their approval to be whole. Beyond boundaries and communication tactics, there are deep emotional shifts that must happen internally if you are going to sustain this middle path over months or years. 8. Moving from grievance to true grief. One of the most exhausting loops in a toxic or narcissistic relationship is the endless cycle of grievance, the perpetual outrage at how unfair, cruel, or irrational they are being. While that anger is completely justified, staying stuck in grievance keeps your energy tied to them. It keeps you fighting a battle that has no resolution. To protect yourself from collapse, you have to transition from grievance to grief. Grievance asks, why are they doing this again? Why can't they just be reasonable? Don't they see how much they are hurting me? This mindset keeps you tethered to the hope that they will change. Grief acknowledges, they are never going to be the healthy, empathetic, or supportive person I wished they were. This is who they are, and it hurts, but I accept this reality. Grief is painful, but unlike grievance, grief actually moves you forward. When you allow yourself to mourn the loss of the relationship or person you wished you had, you stop expecting them to give you peace. You stop going to an empty well expecting to find water. 9. Practicing radical acceptance in real time. Radical acceptance doesn't mean you approve of their behavior, nor does it mean you condone abuse. It simply means you stop arguing with reality. When you are in the middle of an encounter with a toxic person, practice saying to yourself internally, this is a narcissistic moment happening right now. This is their limitation, their defense mechanism, and their nature. When you accept that a scorpion stings or that rain is wet, you don't spend your energy being shocked when it happens. You simply open your umbrella. Radical acceptance is your mental umbrella. It allows you to witness their behavior with detachment rather than absorbing it into your own nervous system. 10. Building a post-interaction detox protocol. Just as you prepare your mind before entering an interaction, you must have a clear procedure for clearing that toxic energy out of your system afterward. If you don't detox, that residual stress accumulates, leading straight back to somatic exhaustion and emotional shutdown. Develop a simple, repeatable post-encounter routine. Physical discharge. Stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline physically collect in your muscles. Shake out your hands, stretch, go for a quick walk, or play a song and move your body. Physical movement signals to your brain that the threat phase has passed. Verbal or written release. Do not process the interaction with the toxic person. Instead, journal about what happened without editing yourself, or send a brief voice note to a trusted friend or therapist just to vent the emotion out of your body. Sensory reset. Wash your face with cold water, change your clothes, or drink a cold glass of water. These small sensory shifts create a psychological boundary between the interaction that just ended and the rest of your day. Finding and holding this middle path is not a one-time decision, it is a daily, intentional practice. There will be days when an interaction gets under your skin, or days when you feel exhausted and tempted to slip back into that quiet, numb collapse just to make the noise stop. When those moments happen, offer yourself deep compassion. You are carrying an extraordinarily heavy burden, navigating a complex and unnatural dynamic that most people outside of it will never truly understand. You don't have to navigate this perfectly. Every time you prepare before an interaction, every time you choose not to defend yourself against a false accusation, every time you reach out to a safe friend or take a quiet walk after a hard encounter, you are successfully walking the middle path. You are protecting your spirit, preserving your autonomy, and ensuring that even if you cannot leave the situation right now, you will never lose yourself within it. Thank you again for listening, and please take gentle care of yourself today.